Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, welcome to Sunday Soul Day. We are so thrilled to have our Soul Fueler, Juan Fernandez, on.
Hmm.
Juan is a transition coach for athletes who Juan and I met actually at the Jay Shetty Coaching Certification School. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. We're so grateful to have you join us. Tell us a little bit about why a transition coach? Like, let's just start there.
Yeah, it's gonna need some context, so I'll go ahead and explain a little bit of how it came to be.
Yes, take us through your background.
Yeah. So I'm a former professional basketball player. I played professionally for over 10 years. I was a student athlete in college at Temple University, so I also played basketball there. And going even further back, I started playing basketball when I was 6 years old. My dad was a professional basketball player, so sports have defined my entire career and my life. And so I decided to retire last year at 31 years old, which is relatively young for an athlete. You know, I could have kept playing physically for a few more years. Mentally, I just got to a place where I was very exhausted and burnt out a little bit. And so, you know, life's priorities changed. We were living in Europe with my wife and my two small children. And after a long time of doing that lifestyle, it just came to a point where we said we wanted to be closer to our extended families and just the lifestyle of a professional athlete is, you know, there's a part that's seen by most people, there's a part that's most challenging, that's behind the scenes. And so I think that after a long time of playing sports, that got to me a little bit. And so we decided to move from Europe back to the States, and that's when I saw what this transition is like. And so I know how much of a challenge it can be for many athletes. I know it was for me. It took me like 6, 7, or 8 months to really start finding my way. And in many aspects, you don't really know what's going on. It's lack of routine. I'm finding this out now, no, and after the journey's passed, but lack of routine, discovering your identity outside of being an athlete after that's pretty much all you've done for 20 plus years. And there's very a few common patterns there that just resonated with a lot of athletes as I was opening up, and they were opening up to me. And so that to say, why a transition coach? One, because I think that it is an important stage in every athlete's life, and I would like to provide that guidance and support that's needed. And at the same time, I think that because changes in not only for athletes, but in many ways, change and transitions are what define the person we become, right? And so I think there's so much power there if used and leveraged positively. And that's what I try to provide. I'm also working with some clients who are non-athletes, and we try to do the same. Like there's always a transition or a change in their lives, and we try to figure out, okay, how can we make an opportunity of this challenge to maybe even create something that's better than you ever imagined. And it takes going through that, walking through the fire. I say it is uncomfortable, but what you find on the other side, experience shows me that it's usually better if you are able to navigate it. And so that's what really inspires me about this type of work.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. And you are absolutely right. I mean, Ali and I, that's something, we share in common when we talk about our transitions and a lot of things that we went through. You and I talked before, but I'm a former athlete as well. And so I know all about the transitions. What was it like for you? This is a two-part question, but during that time, like with your wife being overseas, like what was that like? Like, was she able to work? Like, what was that like as you were playing?
Yeah, I think that that's a good question because it's a big aspect of athletes um when they go play far away from home, I should say. And that usually happens a lot, especially with a lot of Americans or people from South America where I'm from that go play in Europe. It's like um everything revolves around your job, in this case my job, because it's so demanding, that and even more so when you have kids. Like I could spend weeks away from home, and so my wife, she was there with the kids and she did an amazing job, and I was so blessed and lucky to have her, and she embraced that lifestyle fully. But their well-being is also influences a lot in my performance and my job. Like you can compartmentalize areas of your life, like it's all interconnected, right? And I think a combination of both, in this case family and career, it's needed and it's necessary. So how to navigate those things, I would say that they really built our character and it made us stronger as a couple and as a family. I think that what we have today is because, having managed all those challenges and having to literally figure it out on our own over there. And so today there are many beautiful anecdotes. At the time, there were probably very challenging moments.
Yeah.
But it's our one of our philosophies of life that we try to live by is to really try to understand that everything happens and for a reason and it serves a purpose. Now, you may not see that right away, but when we look back at our lives, we realize how every single situation that we were put into, um, brought us to today and made us who we are. And so that's a really cool thing that I also try to implement when I coach, right? Because I get to mentor some athletes who are a few years, where I was a few years ago, and I think there's power in learning from those who have gone through similar journeys as well.
No, and before Ali asks her next question, I want to just touch on the transition because I've seen it at all different levels. Like for myself, I know Ali experienced it. She was also an athlete, incredible athlete, and my father played professional football and had to transition out of being in the limelight, being in just that routine and training, traveling, being on a team. And it's almost, even though I tell people like when you work, that's a portion of what you do, but as an athlete, because it's so interconnected, it's it's like mind, body, spirit, everything. It's almost your identity. Like that's how you identify. And so when you leave that, then you're like, who the hell am I? Like, what am I here for? What am I supposed to do? And so I saw that even in my dad, and it's like, kudos to him. Like he took him a minute. He tried, a few different things, but then he was able to, kind of tap in and kind of navigate that. But again, I think back to when he left professional football, there wasn't a lot of tools, there wasn't a lot of kind of roadmaps and guidelines, So and even
Yeah.
I don't even think coaches were, big back then, having a coach to lean on. So it's just amazing what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I get it. I get it firsthand, your dad's experience. And I think I think we live at a time where these things are being talked more about,
Yeah.
mental health in sports. And it's a good thing. But there is still this, like, especially I see it with men's sports, you're bred and built to never show any weakness. Like I always say that. And even unintentionally, it's like, well, when you're tired on the court, don't bend your knees because you're going to show and it can be used against you. Like you never show it. And I try to tell the athletes I work with, like, yeah, that's good and all when you play sports, but this is a different stage of your life. Like it's and actually the sign of strength on this side is asking for help because it takes a lot of courage to be able to open up and ask for help when needed. And so, yeah, all those things that you mentioned, the identity is huge. It's huge because it's what you just said. It's not just something you do. it becomes who you are. And when that part is over, whether it is like sudden injury, career-ending injury, or, you know, burning out like it happened to me, or even when it's planned, I see athletes who push it back because that uncertainty of having to figure out who you are without your sport, it's scary. It's scary. And that's a big part of the work I try to do, is trying to identify you know, what makes you who you are without that. And you know, you don't have to leave it behind, because it will always be part of your story and who you are. But how can we take those things that made you great and transfer them to this next stage? And I think that's the exciting part of this, and where I say that there's literally a great opportunity to do something good, because athletes have that mindset that they built, that it's needed and it's different, and it can apply to anything else. So once that click is made, I can guarantee that a former athlete is going to reach any goal they set their mind to. But you know, it's a stage that needs help, and that's where I try to come in, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Juan. I love that you brought up that you can redirect that athlete energy to something else, and how you brought up that to me, it's kind of like the bow and arrow. You pull back a little to shoot forward, and it can be better on the other side. I always tell my clients, change doesn't equal worse. And often in our mind, we think something that's changing for us is going to be something disastrous. And like you said, it's often and almost always better on the other side when we've gone through those growing pains. Did not play a professional sport, but I was a Division I All-American water polo player. And everything I had ever done after I'd finished my senior year, everything I'd done was behind me. Everything I'd worked for, school and sports, was behind me. And I almost equate it to like a child star, where, you know, they shine bright and then burn out, and then what's next? And didn't feel like I had the tools. I didn't feel like I had spent a lot of time working on my character. I just worked on my skills. And I didn't really know where I was going, and definitely went through a transitional period. And I think this is so amazing that you do this, because after talking to other former athletes, they kind of all went through something really similar. So thank you. This is going to help so many people. I wanted to ask you, because you're talking about your experience. Like I said, I can't even imagine being a professional athlete and doing it on the level you were on. What was your most memorable moment?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think that, and I learned this on the other side as well, because if you asked me while I was playing, my mind would have automatically gone to a result or a championship, or you know, some sort of outcome that had to do with my basketball career. And now, like, literally here, thinking back and reflecting, and this past year and a half since I retired, it's been much of that, like meditation, spending time with myself, and trying to get to know this identity thing that we were talking about before. You realize that the biggest things, that your biggest accomplishments are the social life you created. So the relationships you've made, and the people you left behind, quote unquote, because you don't leave them behind. But in my case, like, I have friends in Italy who, you know, I care about a lot, and I would love to see them more. And I know I will, you know, continue that relationship along. And I think those are my biggest accomplishments. Literally being able to, I played in Italy and Spain, and being able to go back to the places that I played, and see the genuine relationships that were created. I think that is huge, you know, and like, even my kids have their friends there, and maybe they'll see each other again 5, 6, 7 years from now, and won't even remember each other, but there'll be something in there that they'll know, you know. And that's what it's all about, right? And as athletes, like, like I said, the sport takes so much of our physical and mental energy that sometimes we tend to get caught up into like that aspect of our lives, when life showed me afterwards that, it's a holistic experience. It's like it's everything. And so what I think about the most, it's that it's how, with my wife, we were able to create in every place we went to a group of, core group of people and great relationships that stay. And I think that's our biggest accomplishment, being able to maximize our time that way.
I couldn't agree more. My water polo coach, I played for UC Davis. My water polo coach, Jamie Wright, shout out to Jamie Wright. He coached for 39 seasons. And we all just went to his retirement event. And there was just years and years of girls who had played for him. And we all came together and we were chatting about just so many different memories that were outside of the pool, like riding together on the road trips or staying in the hotels and building those moments. It was all about the game and winning, right? But we don't remember that. It's the lessons we learned from teammates, the lessons we learned from coaches, the experiences that we shared together. It really was all about that. And I miss it completely. I want to ask you, as someone who has experienced the unique challenges and transitions that come with a career in professional basketball, how do you incorporate your personal experiences into your coaching approach?
Yeah, that's also a good question, because there are two sides to that answer. And one is, I think that with what I do, my value proposition is obviously my functional experience, like the functional expertise that I built living that life, and knowing that most of the people I work with, in whichever sport they played, it's a similar journey. At the same time, from a coaching perspective, it takes increased mindfulness on my part to not get into the story and not make any assumptions, because the fact that we lived similar journeys doesn't mean that they're feeling the same way I felt when I was going through that. So I try to set my intentions clearly before every session I have, and before I take on a coaching relationship, and try to use what's useful in that sense, but then from a coaching perspective, try to stay out of it, and provide as much objective help as I can without, and I think it's a work in progress, obviously. And that's one of the things I love about doing this. I see it as a never ending, ongoing journey of growth as you coach, and as you keep learning from your clients, with your clients, alongside your clients. So I'm a huge believer in achieving happiness through feeling that you're always moving forward. I think you should always have a mountain to climb, and this is one of them that I will never reach its peak, and I'm okay with that, and that's what I love about it.
So good. That is so good, Juan. And you are so right. It is just an ongoing journey as we coach, to make sure that we have that awareness. And I think we continue to build it. It's just like anything else that we do. We're constantly practicing and growing that kind of self-awareness muscle, as we're coaching people. And I love that you said, like it's the next mountain to climb. There's this quote by Andre Dishield. I might be saying his name incorrectly, but he says 3 things: surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming. Slowly is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. And the bottom of one mountain is the top of the next. So keep climbing. And so I love that quote, but you just reminded me of that. So amazing. What are some like common things that you see, like some challenges in athletes, like, from physical, mental, emotional challenges, as they're kind of transitioning out of their sport and, transitioning to their next phase in life, like, and how do you help them navigate that?
Yeah, that is a good question. I also asked myself as I started with this, because I wanted to put together a sort of structure to know like how we would work together and show athletes what's possible. But I also wanted to leave it flexible enough because I genuinely believe it has to be personalized. Not nobody's journey is the same, and everybody's unique in their own ways. And so I the way I try to work is around these common patterns that I see. But again, trying to identify what the athlete is going through at that specific time of their journey, because some will come to me right before retirement, knowing that it's about to happen. Some will come to me 2 months after retirement, and some have even told me that 3 years into the retirement, they still feel stuck and not really knowing what they want to do. So, with that to say that every step is different depending on where the athlete is at. But I think identity, to answer your question, identity is the main one. It's a big one because I know I lived through it, and it's the most challenging one that may take more work to really become self-aware and identify who you are. And there's a bunch of exercise that we try to go through, exercises that we do together, that they do as homework, and then we come back and reflect. But understanding that was a challenge for me, and I know that it takes, consistent work on the part of athletes who are struggling with that. And then there are also a few others. One for me that I didn't really understand until recently was the lack of structure. Because if you think back at your athletic career, your routine and your schedule is always defined for you. Like, your coaches give you practice times, recovery time, rest, therapy, and then you go back the next day and you practice, and then you have games scheduled, be here at that time or whatever. And all of a sudden it's on you now to create your own schedule. And that can be challenging. Like it's liberating at the beginning. I know it was for me. And that's why I didn't really understand what was going on. But for me, for example, I said 20 plus years, everybody telling me I had to work out to stay in shape. And I did not like that part of my job. Like, I like playing basketball. I didn't like conditioning. And so I said, when I retire, nobody's going to make me work out. And I spent 4 or 5 months without doing anything, just letting myself go. And it happens to a lot of athletes. And you start putting in weight, it becomes unhealthy. And for me, the wake-up call was playing with my kids one day and just being out of breath after doing nothing. Like, I thought to myself, I used to practice like 5 hours a day. Now I can't even go up the steps without losing my breath. And so that's when I, decided that something should change. And I started, really reading and understanding, doing research also to learn from other athletes' journeys and stuff like that. And then it's trial and error. So I found that having a structured routine really helps that too. Even if you don't have a job, you can still create a routine around your schedule and the things that you want to do. So yeah, those to name a couple, but it's, it can go in many, many ways. And what you discover along the process, it's also different from every athlete. But that's what I think my main focus is, that it's having a structure that allows us to have a clear idea of how we're moving, at the same time that we can remain flexible depending on what the athlete needs and where they're at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could not agree more about the learning how to have structure or self-starting. I experienced that as well. And when you touched on the health struggles, I developed a thyroid issue just because I kind of went through a rebellion. I was like, oh, no one's telling me I have to work out 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, and then weights on my own. I'm going to do nothing, or I'll work out, or I'll get to it. And it really took a toll on my health, which ended up taking a toll on my mental health as well. And so I love that you do exercises with your clients. I'd like to hear a little more about that, for helping them with the self-identity, and also tools and techniques for helping your clients with with structure. Still to this day, I find that I do better being in organized classes for workout, because I, put in, like I sign up for a class and then I'm committed to going, and trying to find that commitment to self as enough motivation to go is something I'm still working on and would love to hear more about that. Can you just really quickly tell me about some of the exercises that you do with your clients to help them with the self-identity piece?
Yeah, so that is a good one, and I like doing those types of work. I think that to name a few, I will ask clients, and this is something that my coach also implemented with me, and I kind of took it and ran with it as well, is really making a list of all your titles, meaning everything that you think you are. And a lot of it involves writing, because it kind of like, I think writing your thoughts on paper in a way just makes them real. And that's the power behind journaling as well, which I encourage all my clients to do if they're willing to. So writing down all your titles, and then from that list, identifying the ones that you like and want to keep, and identifying the ones you would want to add. And then that second list would be all the titles you want. And then the third list, it would be identifying the titles that you do not want. And so by clearly defining, and these are titles that you may see within yourself, and that you may see that people kind of like label you as, And so I think that once we have those three lists, then we reflect and go over them. And by asking like why and exploring those titles deeper, I think athletes usually come to big realizations in that sense. And you make sense of, where you're at and how you're thinking. Other exercises that I encourage them to do is pick 3 people in their lives. One would be a family member, one would be a friend, and ideally an honest friend, somebody that will, keep things real with you and not sugarcoat anything. And then a mentor they had during their career, someone important, and really sit down with them and ask them, one, what do you see my strength and weaknesses? Ideally, related to my sport, because that's what they know you for, but ideally outside, like going more deeper to the root. And I think a good question for these people to kind of identify how others see you, and others who care about you and are going to tell you the truth, is how do you see me making a difference in the world, like creating an impact? And I think there's power behind that question, because I don't know. It never occurred to me before when I played to sit down with my mom and ask her that, like, or sit down with a friend and ask him that. And I think that just taking the time to explore those things and using the resources you have around you, which, in this case, the people around you, can help you with that self-awareness piece. And then I always tell the athletes that it may seem like we know ourselves, but we don't really know ourselves unless we take the time to know ourselves, to get to know ourselves. And I discover that along the way. And so who are you really? It's something that you need to answer for yourself by spending time with yourself. And so I encourage them to try to find a tool or a technique or a resource that will help them with that. And for me, it's a lot of journaling. It's been years of journaling, but because I like to write, and meditation. It's been 3 years, I think, that I already started with meditation. And it's so powerful in that sense, because you spend time with yourself. And I know this is difficult. Like, I was reading about the study the other day that I mentioned, and I think Jay Shetty mentions this study a lot, and I think that but it's the one where they grab a group of people, I think it was the University of Virginia, and they ask them whether to spend 15 minutes alone with their thoughts or get an electric shock, like small electric shock. And like 80% of those people chose the electric shock. And I think that says a lot to the fact that we don't really spend time to getting to know ourselves. And why? I think the reason is because you may not be completely comfortable with what you find. But what I found is that also you cannot do anything about those things that you may want to change or that may be holding you back unless you face them and try to understand them and accept them for what they are and what they've given you, and then make a conscious choice to try to, work your way around them. And so it's like ripping the Band-Aid, but for a longer process and period. But that I truly believe that it's necessary. Like, you have to go through that if you're on your search for becoming your best self. And I think that athletes have an opportunity to become, who they were meant to be. And that happens after sports. Like, it cannot be within your sport. It just cannot, because on average, you play until 30 years old, and no matter the sport. And so you have 2/3 of your life ahead of you. Like, your life is not defined by what you did on the court. It needs to be beyond that. And so that's yeah, sorry, my long answer, but I think that answers your question, hopefully.
No, that's incredible. And I really like the idea of using people you trust as a sounding board to help you with the self-identity, because you're right, we don't know ourselves outside of our sport or outside of whatever role we've taken on. So I think that's incredible. I want to know a little bit about your background as a husband and father, and how it influenced your coaching style and your understanding of balancing priorities in life beyond sports.
Yeah, I think that the birth of my kids really changed my perspective on everything. And I heard that from a lot of parents. But truthfully, I think that before that, I saw, and I even spoke about this with my wife, so she wouldn't kill me if she heard it, but I saw basketball as literally the main thing in my life. And I think that just kids opened up a new way of seeing the world that I had not experienced before. And so gaining perspective, and really showing me what is really important in life allowed me to kind of stay away from, say we play a game on Sunday and we had an off day on Monday. And if we had lost the game on Sunday and I played terrible on Monday, I couldn't think about anything else other than that game. And so I could not be in that present moment with my wife, no matter the situation or the circumstance. And my kids really pushed me to kind of, stay away from that, because, they needed me. They wanted my time. They wanted my energy. And I owed it to them to kind of separate. And like I said before, it's hard to compartmentalize different areas of your life. So I think my kids showed me how to try to merge the two and understand when is one and when is the other. And so, yeah, I think that coaching also, in that sense, because of everything we're learning and the reasons that I said before of how this is, a process of ever ongoing learning, I think coaching also makes me, ironically, a better father and a better husband, because you start looking at people differently. You try to empathize, you learn new things from other people, from our certification, from, as a natural part of this journey that just make you better in every area of your life. Because I always, and my coach said this to me, you can only take your clients as deep as you're willing to go yourself. And since this journey started for me, I am fully committed to becoming the best coach and the best person I can be. And it's been a year of incredible growth, for the first time in my life outside of basketball. And I find that makes me a better father, because I learn new ways to talk to my children as they get older, kind of like coaching them through things as well, which is really empowering them to find their own answers. And it's incredible. and a better husband as well, because, you know, my wife and I, we talk about these things all the time and we go through it together. So I think it goes, you know, it goes both ways, and it's just amazing.
Wow. One, I feel so similar to you. Like coaching has just been incredible. I went into the Shetty program with one kind of goal in mind and wanting to impact in a certain way, not knowing that I was going to learn myself deeper, you know, and really be able to show up in a different way than I've ever been able to show up throughout all my careers, you know, from being an athlete to working in a bunch of different industries to working in tech. So I completely, what you said resonates with me so deeply. I had a question about like athletes, like, you know, how do you help them with like goal setting, right? Like, let's just think about an athlete who just left their sport, you know, like you said, the routine is a big thing. They might even be rebelling. I know some athletes that turn to different substance abuse, you know, they might start drinking, they might start doing, you know, drugs and doing different things. How do you help them like even think about a goal?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think that the starting point to everything, or almost everything, is that self-awareness piece. I think that you cannot know where you're going or where you want to go without first knowing where you're at. And ironically, you find that then setting goals and making a plan to reach that goal is something that athletes are so used to, because that's what they've done their entire lives as a team and individually. But I think that before setting a new goal, it's really worth taking the time exploring and identifying, um, you know, creating that self-awareness to really understand where you want to go, because it's meaningful to you, not because, you know, you either think that you don't know how to do anything else, or because everybody else is telling you you should go be a basketball coach, like they told me when I stopped playing and I didn't want to be a basketball coach, you know. And so I see that a lot.
Mhm.
And athletes, it's like, well, you know, I was a basketball player my entire life, I'm going to go coach because, you know, everybody's telling me I would be good at it. And but in reality, it may not be what they really want to do. And so when that happens, my belief is that it's hard to, it's not sustainable. Like, it's going to come a time where if you didn't choose it for, you know, because it's authentic and what you want to do, it's not going to end well, or it's not going to maximize your potential. And so I think that that's what I would say, like when an athlete comes and they, because and you may know this from coaching as well, usually the goal or the outcome or the objective that a client comes with turns up not being really what they want, but there's a goal behind the goal, right? And so I think it's worth taking the time and exploring what that is. And it might take a few sessions, a few weeks, even a month. But I think you really create the foundation to have a successful journey afterwards. And with athletes specifically, once that's done, I find that then the reaching of that new goal, it's fairly, you know, it's fairly like repeated processes, because that's what you've done your entire life. But the difference is that an athlete, you may have common goals that were set for you, like around your sport, right? You either have to win a championship and that's your team goal, and then you want to improve an aspect of your game skills. Now it may be the first time in your life where you're actually having to decide what to go after for you and for what you want. And so that's why I think it's key in the process to identify what that is genuinely to you, and then we'll develop a plan to go after it.
That is so good, Juan. And it's so interesting you said that because I know so many athletes that are told to coach, you know, go into coaching. And I think it works really well for some. Like, you know, my sister's one, she was an incredible basketball player as well, played for Duke and also USC, and had a short stint in the WNBA as well. And you know, it works well for her, you know, and also her future husband as well. Like he played overseas, I believe, a couple years and is now coaching. But it doesn't work for everyone. Like I couldn't be that type of coach, like in my sport, but like for all of these other things, it works really well for me. So I think Ali had a follow-up question.
Yeah. I'm just wondering for yourself and for your clients, how you help them to find something, or how you navigate through the challenges of finding things that are equally exciting and stimulating.
Mhm.
And then sometimes they received a lot of attention and praise. And so how do you help them navigate through that and to find something that is exciting and maybe not boring for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it happens a lot. And the reason it's because there are very few things that can compare to the thrill and excitement that you get being a professional athlete. It's just, I don't know, like I don't think there's any really. Like there's just something about the whole process of the job, quote unquote, the job. It's of playing in front of 15,000 people and then scoring a basket. Like I speak from my experience and having literally um, 14,500 of those 15,000 screaming, and cheering for you, and then stopping you on the street because they recognize you and they know you, or have your your kids' classmates at school telling them like, oh, I watched your dad's game yesterday. And so there's a whole set of things that are hard to replace. um, the symptom that I ask athletes to identify when it comes to that is, how often do you find yourself talking about how great of an athlete you were, or trying to tell people or showing them um, how you could have done this or that, or how you could have been better than this one or that one. And it's all good and all, but it may say something about a part of you still living in the past, right? And so I think there's when I also try to take the time to identify where that's coming from, why it's there, why it's happening. um and then one thing I found that really, even though it probably doesn't replace that aspect of being a professional athlete, um, something that always works well is trying to find a bigger meaning and purpose behind your next search. Because when it's bigger than yourself, whether it is a cause you believe in or in service of other people, and I think that's where coaching helped me fulfill that void in a way. I think that finding that it's worth it, and in many ways it allows athletes to move forward with intention and purpose and meaning. And it might be, like, I'm speaking from the athlete standpoint, but it might be for a lot of people, for most, that when the motivation comes from something bigger than yourself, it's like never ending, right? It's like you're always trying to move forward. And so that's something that I always mention with clients who are still not over that phase and not finding ways to really overcome the the thrill and the excitement that they got when being a professional athlete.
So good, Juan. Like, so good. And it's so interesting because really good question, Ali, around that, because I imagine, when athletes are able to find purpose, then that's when they can start to cultivate that kind of positive mindset, from transitioning, from one sport to then now figuring out what they want to do. Like, how do you help them? His mindset is such an important part of being an athlete, and going from the sport to then trying to figure out what you want to do. Like, how do you help them cultivate that, positive mindset and kind of resilient mindset?
Yeah, I think it involves a lot of discovery of what they did, even consciously or subconsciously, many times, to build the athlete's mindset that we say, right? And so what did you do to focus before a game, or what did you do to overcome challenges? And there are many ways to do that, right? And athletes, in a way, I think that our jobs and our journey pushes us to have to develop that resilience and that strong mindset. Otherwise, you literally don't survive. It's really it's cutthroat because it's so challenging and so demanding, and you have opponents and you have coaches who are pushing you to the limit. You're pushing your body to the extreme, even to unhealthy standards sometimes. And so the mindset is a big part of an athlete's journey, that it's developed whether you know it or not. And so there comes a time now during this transition where it's worth exploring those things, identifying them, and seeing how you can use some of those techniques moving forward. So to give you a personal example, one thing I discovered during my journey is when I was like 12 or 13 years old, I have memories of playing in my parents' backyard in a house that we had, in a tiny basket, like those like I guess those like Playmobil baskets. I don't remember if that was the brand or not, but it was literally a basketball that was not much bigger than a tennis ball. And I would go back in that backyard and visualize myself playing in that tiny basket. But I was, to me, in my mind, I was in the NBA. Like, I was playing against the best of the best. And not only that, I was scoring 50 points and I was beating them and scoring game-winning shots and whatnot. And reflecting, and through these meditation and things that I mentioned before, I realized that if I could go back to that kid that was playing in that backyard, I literally believed that it was possible. Like, I was seeing myself there. And I think that many athletes have similar experiences in their own journeys. And so visualization, really believing that you can do it, is a big part of becoming an elite athlete. And you can talk to many of them, and most will tell you the same thing, or tell you a similar story that I'm telling you. And so here comes the challenge. So how can you transfer that to this next stage of your journey once you identify where you want to go? And it's difficult. For me, it was difficult, and it still is. Like, it's an ongoing process, because you have to get back to that mindset that as a kid was probably not as tainted as it is now, with limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, and whatnot. So it's a tricky and interesting part. But the mindset usually in an athlete is there. Now, how can we, go back, identify those techniques you used, and bring them to the present and use them to move forward? And it's a cool thing, I'm telling you, to work around and try to help them discover that. And when you see that, that aha moment, it's really a cool feeling from the coaching standpoint, that really it's different than anything I've accomplished in the basketball court. Like, it's just there's a different type of fulfillment behind it.
No, absolutely. And that aha moment is so beautiful, even for non-athletes, just I use visualization with my clients as well. And personally, like, just even not just in, sports, but outside of it, like when I was working in organizations. So it's so powerful. I did want to kind of switch gears and ask, this is a question we ask all of our soul fuelers. You mentioned journaling and meditation, but what are some other ways that you kind of fuel your soul, or any kind of routines or rituals that you do?
Yeah, I think the main answer to that question is spending time with my wife and kids. And that re-energized me in a way that nothing else can. And so, like, I even work around that with my coach. She's like, some weeks I see you down and like your energy may be a little low. And she's like, well, what can you do tonight to kind of, change that energy and that? And so I'll say, I'll take my wife and kids out to dinner or for ice cream, and we'll spend some time together, just the four of us. And what we like to do, since we've come here to Florida and we're so blessed to be able to do this, is like around 7 or 7:30 p.m., especially now in the summer, we'll go to the beach that is 15 minutes from here, and watch the sunset with them. And I started now, especially with my daughter who's 7. My son, he's 5, and he's like he doesn't care much, but she will, as the sun is going down, we'll take a few minutes to do some breath work, and so together. And I think those things start creating some sort, like, I don't know what she will remember, but it's these things that I know work for me, and so I want her to have those tools. And I think the early you develop that, something to really live in the moment and enjoy what's happening. I try to do that with my kids as well, and my wife. So that fuels my soul, spending time with them.
So beautiful. I love that. She's doing breath work at 7. It's amazing. I haven't got the breath work to my kids, but they meditate, and our kids are the same age. My daughter's 5 and my son is 7. So amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think that's incredible. I also do different techniques with my daughter, and she's 4. And it's amazing to start that with our children at a young age so that they have tools that they can start. They do it in their way, but it's something that they can have. We model it to them, and then they can practice it. It's incredible. I love that you brought up mindset. It sounds a little bit or a lot like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you would identify the thought, stop the thought, and replace the thought, because our thoughts impact our feelings impact our actions, and then our actions impact our thinking. And to get ourselves in that kind of positive mindset, it's so incredibly important. And I kind of want to know about your turning point that awakened you to live your life for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think it was a combination of doing that inner work, so introspection, but also external motivators. And it's an interesting thing. I was reading a book the other day, and it talked about, it posed the question of why human beings usually need some sort of drastic experience, usually on the negative side, to feel like something needs to change or something needs to give. And maybe it's just how we're built and that's how we function and operate. But for me, it took really burning out from my basketball career. And why didn't I stop it before? Even though I knew what was happening, I think it's a combination of many things that we've been talking about today. It's how do you let go of something that's not just what you do, but that's a part of who you are, and not only for yourself, but a part of how everybody else knows you. In a way, like, you feel like you owe everybody an explanation because they know you as the athlete. How are you going to tell them that you're not that anymore? When in reality, it's not about that. But obviously, in the moment, you don't see it. And so for me, a big turning point during that, so there was 3 months before retiring that were the roughest 3 months of my life, I would say. And so I was very at a low point at that time. And I think the red flag for me was being at practice one day and then consistently after that, thinking that I wanted to get injured to have an excuse to get out. And so I understand that not everybody loves their 100% of their job. And there are days that you can go to practice and feel low, or you have to go to the office and you don't want to go to the office. But when that feeling is sustained over a long period of time, and then added to extreme thoughts like that, when I shared with my wife, she got worried. And that's when things started shifting, and I say external influences because even then I was not ready to pull the trigger. And she called my agent, and my agent got worried. And so my agent is somebody that I work with for 17 years. Like, we're good friends, more so than agent-player relationship. And he called me and we talked it through, and he made me realize that I was not chained to the situation, that he would get me out of my contract, and that my mental health came first. And I think deep down I knew that, but I didn't know how to make that next step. And the people around me helped me. And so that's also a big part of why I try to do this type of work, because not everybody has, the people, the support system or network. And so by athletes understanding that there's a possibility to work with someone through this, I think it's beneficial and necessary. And in a way, I learned that the hard way through my journey. So I think the biggest turning point was that. And ironically, it's crazy how your mind starts creating scenarios that then never come to happen, because all the thinking I had that, well, how are people going to take it? Are they going to judge me? No, in reality, is 95% of the people that I cared about and that were around me understood and supported me and encouraged my decision. So it's, you see that afterwards, but it's a matter of how do you navigate it and go through it. And so that was the turning point for me, and that's how my journey went about.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing about being at that place where you almost wanted to have an injury so you could get out. I'm sure so many athletes and former athletes can relate to your experience. Do you have any book recommendations that maybe you use to help yourself through your transition?
Yeah, there are a few. I like to read a lot. In fact, now we're moving houses and my books take up like 5, 6 boxes. My wife kills me. But so I'm trying to think back, what are the most powerful ones that I read during the transition. And there's a book called authored by Jonathan Van Horn, who I was lucky enough to meet on LinkedIn. He's a former soccer player, and he wrote a book called Shift. And it's an acronym, and every letter is a stage of the journey for him. And I think that one helped me a lot. There's also one by Daryl Stinson, who's a former football player, and he wrote Who Am I After Sports? And he has a very powerful story, because he fell into drug abuse and he had suicidal thoughts after sports, and all the things we're talking about to the extreme, and he managed to overcome it. And then now he's a speaker, and it's his teachings and lessons are very, very powerful, and that book helped me too. So those two, I would say. And then outside of the athlete spectrum, I think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty changed my life. And then I try to read a lot. So Atomic Habits also helped me a lot to try to develop those new routines that I was talking about before. So I came across that book at a time where I actually was very much in need of something like that. And honestly, like I think those have been more, and I've been reading a lot more of self-development and personal growth lately, because I find that most of the books I read when I was playing were fiction novels that kind of in a way helped me get away from, my career and everything that was going on for a little bit. It's like, disconnecting for a while. So these past 2 or 3 years have been more of these types of books. So I'd say those four that come to mind now that really helped during my transition.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing. I'm gonna read those books. I want to ask you, what are some of your current aspirations and goals? I mean, you've achieved so much, but what's next for you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So what is next? It's an interesting question, because I'm very proactive, and I have very big goals in my 10-year vision. Like and they all revolve around what I'm doing. So with coaching, but I think that I would love to first, keep spreading the conversation around mental health in sports. And two, I would love to see coaches, like the type of coaching I do, which has to do with mental health and preparing for life after sports. I would love to see more coaches like that within team staffs. I think it would be so important for teams to provide that for their athletes. And I get that sports, it's also a business. So, you know, it is the cold side of this industry in this world. But I think that there are people within the industry and really organizations that care about the person first, not the athlete. And so I think that they should lead the charge in being able to provide these types of services for more and more athletes out there. And because I know that it's hard for athletes to see the need of these things as you're playing, just because of what we said, like you're so 100% involved in your sport. So if the organization and the people around these athletes can start introducing these conversations or these things that we talk about, I think it could be so life-changing in many ways and industry changing. So I hope I can, by doing what I'm doing, make a difference in that space as well. Now the specifics of what that will entail, I have an idea and a vision. I don't know. Like I find that, and this is something that Jay Shetty also says, that you tend to get to where you want in life, just not in the way you expected. And I think that to be true in my life. And so I try not to worry about, you know, the details of how things will happen. But I think long term, I try to think long term, and I think that that would be something that would make me feel accomplished, you know, knowing that I was able to make a positive difference in an industry, in an area that I think it's needed.
Amazing. You already are. So
Thank you.
yeah, like I love your long-term vision, and I do think it's needed, you know, with professional athletes. I mean, you mentioned it's a business. The fact that it's a business, you would think that they'd want to, you know, focus on all areas of their wellness. And so, you know, like think about employees and organizations, like they have all of those different benefits for employees to make sure that employees can perform well and show up to work and do great work and build, you know, amazing products. So
Mhm.
same goes for athletes. So I love your long-term vision and can't wait to see it.
Thank
But
you.
where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are the two social media platforms I use. And then my website is Juan, Juan M. That's Manuel is my middle name. And so JuanM Fernandez.com. That's my website. My amazing wife built it for me because I'm blessed that she works in marketing, because I know it's a big part of being an entrepreneur, and I'm lucky to have that also. But yeah, my website and LinkedIn mainly, I would say, I think it's an incredible platform to meet professionals and people who want value in their lives. And so yeah, I would say reach out. I'm always happy to have these types of conversations with people.
Perfect. And I will be sure to link all of your links in the kind of message box down there.
Thank you.
I am just so grateful that you came on. You blessed Sunday Soul Day. You are our second Soul Fueler. So thank you so much. I know people are going to just take your message. A lot is going to resonate with them. And so much gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan, and happy Sunday, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.